Good morning, everybody. I'll just wait for the room to fill up a little bit. I hope you're all well. You're all very welcome. I will just bring you through a little bit of housekeeping. As you'll see, this is a webinar rather than a meeting, so all of your mics are already off and your cameras are already off, so you don't need to go looking for them. You will receive the recording and the slides from today's session afterwards, so don't worry about that. If you have any questions for Brendan, our trainer today, pop them in the Q&A box and I will put them to him at the end of today's session. And we have the chat box as well. If you have any questions for myself or just want to say hello or have any general comments, pop them in there. Now I will hand you over to Hannah Coleman from the We Act campaign and Board Match, who's going to tell you a little bit about the campaign and how you can get involved.
Great. Thanks, Claire. And good morning, everyone. My name is Hannah Coleman, as Claire said. I am Communications Manager with Board Match. I'm also a proud member of the We Act steering group. Board Match, for those of you who don't know, is a national charity that connects individuals who want to volunteer their skills, time and expertise with charities and not-for-profits that have board and committee vacancies. So welcome to today's session as part of our storytelling series. I'm delighted to introduce you to our trainer today, Brendan Ó'Sé, who will be hosting our session, How to Take Great Photos on Your Phone. I hope you all already know, but today's training is part of the training strand of the We Act campaign. So if you have missed all of our content as they launched recently, I'll tell you a little bit about it quickly, but the We Act campaign is a national campaign to increase public awareness and understanding about the charity and community sector. So by empowering our staff, volunteers and boards to tell their stories is part of how we will share the impact of charities and community organizations around the country. Your staff, volunteers and board members all have fantastic stories to tell about the work they're doing and the change they're making. And We Act and our training series is here as a tool to empower you to tell your story. So the campaign launched on the 27th of October after over a year of development by a core steering group comprised of Board Match, Charities Institute Ireland, Disability Federation of Ireland, DOCUS, The Wheel and Volunteer Ireland. It is supported and made possible by funding from RTÉ Comic Relief Fund as administered by the Community Foundation for Ireland. It has been crafted, refined and bettered by input from those working and volunteering in the sector. And we look forward to continuing with you in that vein as it develops further over the next few years. Today's session will be a great opportunity to hear from Brendan about how you can use photography as a way to show your organization's impact. The storytelling series is a 12-part series running until December, which has been carefully crafted from your feedback from a training needs analysis that we conducted earlier in the year. Each session is free and covers a different area of storytelling or communications, whether that be video scripting or editing, graphic design in Canva, social media or photography. We'll share some more information on our upcoming sessions at the end of today, and you can also see the full details on our website, weact.ie/training. There you can also find the recordings of our previous sessions as well. We'd love you to continue to support us with the campaign, and we have a little call for action for you this week, which is to share your board members' stories. So next week, if you don't know, is Charity Trustees Week. This is Ireland's opportunity to recognise the fantastic work done by voluntary board members around the country. I'm obviously a little bit biased, seeing as I'm from Board Match and trustees are our thing, but we hope you'll join us in sharing your trustees' stories next week. It's an amazing opportunity to share the good work that your trustees are doing every day around the board table. So we'd love you to share your trustee stories with your network and with the We Act community. We'd love to hear about your board and we'll be sharing lots of content, so be sure to like and share the content that we're creating and to join in the celebration of your board members. So today's session will take the following format. Next, I'll pass you over to our expert trainer, Brendan Ó'Sé, for his session on how to take great photos on your phone. We'll have a Q&A with Brendan afterwards, which Claire will facilitate. So if you could pop all your questions into the Q&A box as the session progresses, that would be great. We invite you to tweet and share your thoughts and learnings from today at the other sessions using the #StoriesSeries. And before handing over, I'd just like to thank Brendan, who has given up his time to share his expert insights with us. So to formally introduce Brendan Ó'Sé is an award-winning fine art photographer and an iPhone photographer from Cork. He was part of the original Apple Shot on iPhone global campaign in 2015. A winner of many prestigious international awards, Brendan has been invited to speak about and exhibit his work around the world. Along with his popular mobile photography workshops with the Gallery of Photography in Dublin and the Glucksman Gallery in Cork, Brendan has also given workshops throughout Europe and Asia. Coming from an education background, Brendan allows for a deep learning experience in his workshops and equips participants with skills that they can immediately put into practice. Using the iPhone, he tries to see and create in unusual ways, and this results in some unique imagery and striking street photography. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to having you continue to support us with the We Act campaign. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction, Hannah, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come to talk to you this morning and to share with you my love for this fantastic device that we all carry around with us, and which is, in my opinion, the greatest camera ever invented. And it doesn't matter if you have an iPhone or if you've got an Android phone, that you're carrying around with you in your bag or your purse, the greatest camera ever invented. And we'll discover why as we go through. So in the introduction like that, I come from an education background, and I know that with the online learning, that sometimes it can be a little bit one-directional. So sometimes, just to make things a little interactive, during the session, I may invite you to write some things into the chat box. So first of all, just one quick question for you. That I shoot with an iPhone Pro Max 11. And if you could maybe just write into the chat what type of smartphone you have. Okay, it could be an iPhone, Samsung, Motorola, Sony, LG, Huawei. Just to write into the chat that I can get an idea of the different types that we have. Well, a lot of Samsungs, iPhones, iPhone, Huawei, Google Pixel, iPhone, Huawei. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Galaxy, Samsung. So we seem to be split between iPhones and Samsung and Huawei as well. Now, I shoot with iPhone most of the time, but I also, from time to time, will use Google Pixel and Huawei. And that what I will say is that on some of the photographs that I'll show you this morning were shot back with an iPhone 3 and iPhone 4. And as we'll discover that, photography is not about the cameras. Photography is very much about what you see and how you can compose and bring together elements to make dynamic composition. So very good. So I'll share my screen. Okay, and yeah, here we are. And come back up to the start and play from the start. Okay, so what I've done is, this is just an introduction. Some of my photographs, all of them that I'm showing you have been shot on iPhone through the years. And coming from an educational background, just a little about myself. So that I'm the head of my day job. I'm not a professional photographer because I think that would suck the joy from what I'm really passionate about and what I love so much with photography. My day job is in UCC. I'm the head of development and professional courses in the Language Center. Been working there since the last millennium, quite a long time. In 2015, everything changed for me. That I had photographs that were picked up by Apple and went on global campaigns on huge billboards in 72 cities for 6 months, and honestly changed my life. And since then, I've been offering workshops here in Ireland with Cork's Glucksman Gallery and Gallery of Photography in Dublin. And I've been fortunate enough to be invited to give workshops around the world. And since COVID, I've begun to deliver a lot of these workshops online. And you may think that learning about photography in a classroom or online is about learning how to swim in a classroom or online. But what I'll hopefully give you today is that I'll pass on my passion for photography and inspire you and give you a lot of tips and techniques that you can put into practice immediately. So in the session today, so what we're going to do is we've had a quick introduction. The next thing we're going to talk about is why is mobile photography so great? And we'll discover, why the camera that you have with you is the greatest camera ever invented. Then we look about what you can do on your smartphone camera. And, you might be surprised at some of the things that you're able to do on it. And, surprised that it's a one-stop shop in terms of that before, if you think back to film days, you had to buy your film, you had to put it into the camera, then you had to bring it to get it developed. And how could you share it? Now from the photographing to the editing to the sharing, it's a one device that you have everything in the one device. Then we'll go look through some tips to take great photographs with your mobile camera, do a little bit of editing, and I'm going to show you that the app that I use all the time for editing, be it that if I'm shooting on one of my DSLR cameras or the iPhone, I always use Snapseed, and it's free on both iOS for Apple and on Android and Play Store. So if you haven't downloaded that, just Google, just search for it on the App Store or Play Store, and you can find it. And then we'll have some final questions and answers as we go through it. Afterwards, I'll share the links with Claire, and I'll send her the links for these step-by-step guide to use Snapseed, so you'll be able to look in more detail. It's quite a large document, but I'll show you the basics. I'll show you this morning how I use when I'm editing. I'll send you a useful links document and also information about how to store your photographs, because if you're like me, you're probably getting notifications that you're running out of storage on your phone like that. So that's what we're going to try to get through. So it's not a real camera. Now, that's what I hear so much when people talk about this device here. And I love this photograph that I took back in 2017 in Bangkok. And I loved it because the woman in her right hand has a point and shoot camera. And in her left hand, she's got the greatest camera ever invented. But she believes that a real camera can't be on a mobile phone. Looking at it here, that the camera that she's in her left hand, the iPhone, is a far superior camera than the point and shoot that she has in her right hand. But this is the idea that people have, that it can't be a real camera. Did you really shoot that with an iPhone? But when we're thinking about photography, it might be not a real camera, but it's real photography, and that's what we're going to discover as we go through. So mobile photography, what is it? Okay, this was the first mobile camera I ever had back in 2003, I think. It was a Motorola clamshell. This was the state of the art back in 2003. And it had a small, maybe little thumbnail size screen, and it took very, very pixelated photographs, but it was absolutely spectacular that you could do something like that with a phone, that you had a phone that was also a camera. Nowadays, as I say, I shoot with the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I don't update each year. People ask me that, do I get a new iPhone each year? No, I wait for a big jump in innovation. And prior to that, I had the 7 Plus. I waited for the 11 Pro Max. I probably will wait until next year, because again, there'll be a great leap in the innovations with the camera technology next year. I also shoot with other real cameras, if you want to call those, Nikon, Fuji, got a range of lenses, but they live unloved in my drawer just here underneath my computer, and I only take them out if I'm traveling, which unfortunately we haven't had the opportunity to do for a long time now. But the iPhone is always with me. But again, if you think about mobile photography, is this an example of a mobile camera? Yeah, probably is. You can pick it up and move with it. This is probably an example of a camera that's not mobile, the closed circuit TV. Can't move with that. Now, when we were back in travel days, and when I used to travel quite a bit out to Asia, people would say to me, when you're out there, you need to be a bit careful with the food. When they're cooking, they don't use, proper ovens and stoves like we have here. But the reality is that the food was absolutely delicious. And did it matter if it was cooked on, pots and pans over open fires here, or on state-of-the-art ovens and cookers? No. Similarly, when I was out there, they eat with chopsticks, that they don't use a knife and fork. But when you're eating, all you're trying to prevent is this. So does it matter if it's with a knife and fork or chopsticks? No, not really. And if you think back to the lockdowns that we had, and everybody had COVID hair and waiting to get their hair cut, did you ever experience come back after getting your hair done and somebody says to you, wow, they must have had a fantastic scissors? So the point that I'm making is the same with photography, that photography isn't about the image capturing device. It's about the actual image that you get. And if you think about it, that probably in your home, you probably have a biscuit tin or you've got an old box, and inside of that, you've got treasured photographs. And these could be, discolored, they could be tattered, but that they're priceless to you. And that's what the power of photography. It doesn't matter, you could have 10,000 euro Leica camera, or you could have, an iPhone 6. You can still have the potential to get a great photograph that is, important and memorable to you. So again, what about photography? What is it? For me, it's moving from reactionary, when you see a scene and you think, wow, that would make a great photo. You ever experienced that? And you don't have a camera with you and you miss the opportunity? And then moving from being reactionary to intentional. And if you think about it, that what you're trying to do is you're trying to heighten your visual awareness. And because you've got a camera with you all the time, you're moving from the situation that you observe something and think, wow, that would make a nice photo. Wish I had a camera with me. But because you have a camera with you, you can always get the shot. And that change in thinking, that change in dynamic really accelerates your process, being able to, create and make visually dynamic photographs. So again, it's the intentional part of it. And one of the takeaway points that you should have from this morning, that when I do workshops and we go on photo walks, very often people will come back with really, really good photos, but that I would be able to identify maybe how to make it a little better. And I'd ask the simple question, did you take more photos? And they say, no, I just took one. Takeaway point, take multiple photographs, because it's a little bit like sketching. And that if you think about what you're doing with photography, that when you have the lens, when the lens opens and closes, that could be a fraction of a second, a 500th of a second. So your window of opportunity is very, very narrow. And perspective, which is another a very important thing in photography, that if you move a little, the perspective changes. So by taking multiple photographs, you're increasing your opportunities to get a really good one. So again, you're back into thinking about photography. What is it? What are the elements about photography? Is it about cameras or photographs? For me, photography is about the following things. For me, it's all about composition. It's all about trying to see what can be seen and how to see it. This photograph here, I took back in 2011 with an iPhone 4, and it's the one that I use to demonstrate why I think mobile photography is just so brilliant. Now, if you think about where I was when I took this photograph, so I was standing on the runway, heading off on adventure, on travel. And that, where do you think my real camera was? Yeah, it was checked in. But because I had a camera with me, I was actively looking for photographs. And initially, that when I saw this scene appear in front of me, I was attracted to the lens flare from the sky, and then the wing here. But one of the other takeaway points that we're going to get in a minute is that with photography, the art of composition is that something gets your visual attention and you want to take the photograph, but the ability to frame it, but then reframe it is where the art comes in. So initially, I didn't see the people getting onto the plane, but then when I took a little bit of extra care, I noticed them getting on and I reframed. And then you were able to get the storytelling aspect of the passengers getting onto the plane. So composition is absolutely everything. The next thing then is light. Without light, it's darkness. And photography comes from Greek with photo, meaning light, and graphy, meaning writing with light. This photograph here demonstrates for me very often that when you come to a scene, photography is as much about what you can see as what you can't see. So when I came across this scene with beautiful reflections of the bridge on Blackfriars Bridge in London, that I knew it would make a very, very nice black and white image. But then I wanted the extra, element in the photograph. And I said, if somebody walked into the photograph and I had them moving, it would add, make it more dynamic. So I needed to wait. So that in my memory, in my visual bank of memory, I was able to match what I was seeing in front of me with what I was, hoping to create in the photograph. And then patience met luck, and a woman with black and white runners walked into the scene. And if you notice here, here's just to draw your attention to it, because her feet are apart, we've the idea of movement. Also, look at where she's positioned. She's not positioned in the center of the photograph. She's a little off center. So we have the perception of movement. So sometimes when you're framing, if you have your subject off center, it allows the eye to come into the photograph and move around. We'll come back to that in a moment. So with light, story. Now, photography is a universal language, and that because it's visual, we're all able to take our own interpretation from it, and that it's powerful, and that when people look at this photograph here, they see different things. And some of them might think that this is a very, it's homeless people who are, without somewhere to sleep, and that they're sleeping where they can. But the reality is that these were two workers who were taking a break from work, and it's in India. And my Indian, when I saw it first, I had the impression that I shouldn't, take the photograph. But as a friend saying to me, these people are very fortunate. They're working. They're able to take a break from work. Again, so the power of stories that we tell and that we choose to tell, because it's very subjective as well. And photography is very emotive, that when we see things, it's going to have, an emotional response from us. This photograph of a monkey in a cage, that when I showed this photograph to my brother, it made him cry. Now, I think it's quite a sad photograph, and I think that it's powerful in terms of when you see the emotion in the monkey's eyes. But again, that's what you have with photography. So when you're trying to communicate with your images, it is powerful in terms of the stories that you can tell and the emotion that you can evoke in your viewer. And then it's about beauty. This is a photograph of my little girl, and it's back with the iPhone 4. And one of the great things about shooting with the iPhone is that the early iterations were quite limited. And because they were limited, that you needed to experiment and overcome these barriers. One of the things it couldn't do was take photographs in low light. And because of that, it allowed me to develop a little technique where that, because the light wouldn't perform well, the camera wouldn't perform well in low light, if I swept up like that, I'd surprise the lens and I'd get this beautiful fluid movement in the blur with the image here. So photography is about beauty, expressing beauty. It's about fun. And I think that, why I wouldn't ever want to be a professional photographer is I think that, it would just suck the joy out of it. So again, it's storytelling, it's the joy of life, as we see this photograph here, people jumping into the River Ganges in India. But really, what photography is about is that it's about creating memories. It's about documenting, that we were here, this is what we saw, this is how we felt. So this is a photograph of my two kids back when they were, much younger. And I remember that when my little girl was maybe 3 years old and sitting in the back of the car, and she'd ask me so many questions like kids would. And one of the questions she asked was, where do yesterdays go, Daddy? Now, this is a philosophical question. And, I'm driving the car, trying to concentrate on the traffic. And I, like being a good father, I bounced the question back to her and said, I don't know, Lovey, where do you think yesterday's go? And quick as a flash, she replied to me and gave me this beautiful poetic answer, which I always, come back to. She said to me, they go into photographs. And I think it's a lovely way to think of what the power of photography is that we don't lose time, we can stop it, we can get, freeze it, and it's there for us always to return to and experience the emotion that we had or what we want to communicate to others with it. It also allows us to be creative. And that for me, as I said, creativity, where does it come from? Creativity comes from boredom. Now, we said that this is the greatest camera ever, but this is also the most evil device ever invented. Why is it the most evil device ever invented? Because it completely has stopped us from ever getting bored. That now, if we're watching television and there's a lull in what we're watching, we're up at the phone checking. If we're in a queue in the supermarket, we don't, wander off in our imagination, we get our phone out and checking. If we're stopped at the traffic lights, we go over to our phone, reach over to our phone. It's all consuming, and we don't get as bored as we should do, because we're all products of boredom. If our parents hadn't gotten bored, none of us would be here. Okay, so creativity, you're thinking what it comes from. It comes from getting bored. And when we get bored, what happens? We get curious. When we get curious, it causes creativity and not accepting limitations. And that's the great thing about these devices, in terms of that it pushes you to try to think, okay, how can I get better? What can I do to achieve it? All of these photographs here were shot on iPhone 4. And that, again, there's very little editing in these. And it's just simply that technique that I showed you, just swiping up, getting this blurred out image from it. And because they didn't have image stabilization that they have now in the devices. Now to get this image here that you see here, I had to stand and I had to violently move the camera to get this intentional camera movement to give the blurred out effect with it. So creativity is so important. And if you think about the iPhones, there are lots of limitations, okay? It is improved now. And you see that if you look at the back of your phone, you'll see that the little circles here, okay? These are how many lenses they have. So now they've got 3 lenses. Some cameras have 4. So there's a lot that you can do with your camera. So you have the greatest camera ever in your hands. Yeah, seriously, you were thinking, yeah. And why? Because it's always with you. And because it's always with you, you move from the situation that you might observe something and think, wow, that would make a great photo, to actually becoming active and seeking out the photograph. So you move from being reactionary to intentional. You move from taking a snap to making a photograph. And that progression will really accelerate your visual awareness and your ability to compose and take photographs. So that's what it can do. Okay, now what can the camera on your mobile phone do? In the chat, I just want you to very quickly type in what can the camera on your mobile phone do. So it can take photographs, definitely. What else can it do? Just type them into the chat. Make memories, brilliant, brilliant. Record moments, document, video, brilliant. Okay, slow motion, panoramas, okay, live photos, it can edit, it can filter, brilliant, brilliant. But then it's excellent that you're thinking of the kind of philosophical things that it can do as powerful. It is, it can document, it can organize, it can do so much for you in terms of what you're experiencing, what you can return to. Okay, so you can shoot video, and the video that you can shoot on it is broadcast quality. That tonight, if you watch the RTÉ News, that every night there are reports on the RTÉ News that have been shot entirely on iPhone and have been like that since, I would say, 2015. So it's broadcast quality. On some mobile phones now it's 8K, which is just absolutely crazy. That HD 1080 is enough, but when you think you get up to 8K, it's ridiculous. Time lapses. So time lapses, I'll show you one in a moment, that you're able to record, take multiple photographs over a long period of time, and it condenses it into a video then for you. Slow motion video. You have multiple lenses, okay, as you say, and you'll see the ones that you have here, the 3 different lenses. I'll talk about those in a moment. You've got night mode, and night mode is where the software is outperforming the hardware, and that the artificial intelligence, the computational photography that is now standard in the cameras on smartphones is just absolutely mind-blowing. That in a dark room using night mode, you would be able to produce a photograph that would show light. It is spectacular what it can do. It can do panoramas, so it can do the long horizontal, and also can do the vertical. And live shots. Now live shots can be called motion shots on Android, and they're quite a little bit gimmicky. What they are is a second of a second of audio and video before and after the photograph. And then also, with the latest iteration of phones, you've got artificial intelligence for identification of objects. And what this means is that you can put your camera up to an apple. It'll identify the apple, and on some devices, it will tell you how many calories the apple has. That on some devices, you could put your camera up to a plant, and it will tell you what the plant is. And it's just absolutely crazy what the artificial intelligence can do. And then you've got a plethora of apps. Now you've more apps on iPhone than you have on Android. And the simple reason for that is on iPhone, if an app developer creates an app, they have to create one for iPhone. If they create an app for Android, they have to create one for Huawei, for Google, for LG, for all the different manufacturers on Android. You have an all-in-one darkroom. You can shoot, you can edit, you can share. It's just incredible what you can do. So what I want, as we're doing this, have your phone in your hand and begin to experiment and see, that you can do this as well. So the phone, it can take, videos, as you see here with it. Just tell me, can you hear the sound? Just in the chat, say yes, because I may not have hit the box. Yeah, great stuff, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we can do video, Okay, we can do slow motion.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, and it allows you later to go back to edit it. So you can have a lot of fun with the different ones that you can do. Here's me demonstrating my skill with skimming with my kids. You can do a time lapse, and just a little tip for you here. So with a time lapse, the phone must be steady, but you can improvise and anything at all that you could wedge the device into. So what I did here was I just pinned the phone up against 2 ashtrays and stabilized it. And then I shot this little time lapse for, I think it was 45 minutes in Tokyo from a hotel window. But what I want to draw your attention to is that I made great care in setting up the composition so that there was nothing later that I was going to be disappointed with. And one thing you can take away point is what is called edge distraction. So look at your edges and see, is there anything there which is going to detract from the image? So then I just let that record for about 45 minutes and it creates this lovely time lapse. And what I love about it is you're able to go and inspect different things around the scene with it. You can also do panoramic shots, okay? And the panoramic shot is, again, that you're just going to move around the scene. You need a very steady hand. And if you look, sometimes it doesn't work out. You see the guy here on the left, we lose his head, okay? Because he's moving around with it. Now, you may think the panoramic shots, just horizontal, but you can also do them vertically. And they're great for things like waterfalls, mountains, architecture, or just very, very tall people. And it's just a little bit of fun that you can have with panoramic shots. And of course, the photos, you've got all the different types of photos that you can do. On the latest phones, that again, so if you look at the back of your phone and you see these circle things here, what they are your lenses. And with your lenses, you've got a wide angle lens. So you see this photograph here shot by the River Lee in Cork, that it takes in a very, very big part of the image that you see, okay? On iPhone and the other ones, when you open your camera, I'll show you in a minute when you go through it, you'll see you've got 0.5, you've got 1x, and you've got 2. And the 0.5 is the wide angle lens. Okay, it's the wide angle lens that you have. You can shoot portraits. Okay, and this is a portrait, you probably recognize Tommy Tiernan. I did a campaign with Board Gash back in 2018 of the All-Ireland Hurling Championship, taking photographs of people going to the games and learning about their relationship with the hurling and with their fans. And just a little thing about that when I finished it and brought it to exhibition in the Hunt Museum in Limerick, on the opening night when the journalists were there and I was walking the journalists around giving talk about the photographs, one of them said to me, he said, looking at these photographs, like you can really see that the idea that somebody can just get a smartphone and be a photographer, no, you still need to have the expensive equipment. And I had to say to him, well, actually, most of the photographs that you're looking at here were all shot on iPhone 7 Plus. And what had been a very, a kind of lively, engaged encounter walking around with the journalists changed a little after that, because and I can understand that professional photographers, they invest a lot of money in the equipment, and then to discover that a phone can take equally good photographs can be a little bit disconcerting for them. Night mode. So again, that on night mode, it's built in automatically to the latest edition of phones. You can download some apps to compensate for it. And what it can do is there's just with a handheld photograph. So again, this is a photograph of the River Lee in Cork, just held in my hand. And what it will do is that it will leave the shutter open. Now, what happens when the shutter opens is that the light comes in and hits the lens, and that's what will transfer into a photograph. So the longer the lens is open, the more light that comes in. So what happens here, it's maybe about a 3-second exposure, which in photography time is a long time. But you see, it's actually it's fantastic. It's incredible to think what can be done with the night mode now on the cameras. Before, that would have been impossible on a mobile phone. You can shoot burst mode. Now, burst mode is a fantastic a tool to have. And what is burst mode? Burst mode is your ability to take up to 16 photographs in 1 second. Now, on different phones, iPhones or Android phones, it may be 8, it may be 12 or 16. Now, the latest ones, I think it's about 16. And what it does, the way to do it, I'll demonstrate when I connect my phone in a minute for you. On iPhone, you're swiping the shutter to the left, or you're using the top volume button, and it will take multiple photographs for you. On Android, you just keep your finger on the shutter and it'll take multiple photographs for you. When you go to review the photograph, you will see that it has select, and then you can go back and select the photograph that you want. Why burst mode is so good is that for anything where there's movement, so if you're taking photographs of children, if you're taking photographs of pets, if you're taking photographs of traffic or street scenes or birds or anything, that again, remember, you're working in a fraction of seconds of opportunity. So you want to multiply your chances. So with burst mode, it will take up to 16 photographs in a second. So like in 2 or 3 seconds, you've got maybe 50 or 60 photographs. Then you can go back and select the photograph that you want. On iPhone, there's a great app called Burstio, and I'll put it in the links that I'll send on to Claire for you. And Burstio will convert your photographs into videos for you. So you see here in Hong Kong, I set up my scene, had my composition right, and then I just was waiting to get the photograph. And you see that later I'm able to go back and select the photograph that I want from that range. And then you can just shoot regular photographs as well with it. And the live photos, as I said, on Android, they're called motion photographs. On iPhone, they're called live. And in a minute, when I connect my phone, I'll show you where you can locate them. And it's a bit gimmicky, really, to be honest. What it does is it takes a second of audio and video before and after you press the shutter button. Now, if you think about that a little, that means that before you press the shutter button, the camera is listening to you, because it's going to take a second before you press it. And that's a little bit freaky, but anyway. Okay, now, what we're going to do is that I've prepared my top tips and tricks to get the most out of your smartphone, to be able to take, great photographs and show you what you can do, and some kind of techniques which are for all cameras, not just for smartphone. It could be that you've got a point and shoot at home, you have a DSLR. These will apply to them as well. But what I want you to do now at the moment, we're going to try to multiply our learning opportunities, because there's more of you than of me. There's going to be more ideas that will come from you. And it's a good way also to see if your own ideas are the same ones as I have. So just think about it. Let's say a friend came to you and said, I'm going to buy a smartphone. I want to use it for photography. What would you say to them? What would you say? Well, you should do this. You can do this. You shouldn't do this. You can't do that. What advice would you give them? Type it into the chat, and we'll just give you a minute for that. What would you say to them? Okay, spend time to get to know it. Yeah, definitely. Okay, get a tripod. Good. Okay. Don't use auto mode. Get a good portrait app. Good stuff. Moving close rather than using zoom. Okay. Notice the light. Very good. Turn on the grid lines. Really good. Really good ideas. Right. Play around with it. Note the light. Okay. Go to one of my classes. Good stuff. Good stuff. Get good subjects. Very good. Be aware. Try other modes. Okay. Buy the best one. Take multiple photographs. Excellent. Some really, really good ideas. Buy a gimbal. Very good. Get in close. Use portrait. Take lots of photographs. Become an observer of light. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. Candids make best for fluidity. Brilliant. Get comfortable. Increase your confidence. Okay, so we're getting lots of ideas about how to, become a better photographer, how to get the best from the device. And I think, yeah, to have storage, look at paintings, really good advice. Yeah, because photography is informed very, very much from paintings and the composition. And, look at the way the light on the face. Brilliant. So we have lots of ideas there that we have generated, and that you can go back to those later and you can see which ones match with the ideas that I give to you. But I'm very much about collaborative learning. And again, as I said, there's more of you than there is of me. It just makes it opportunity to learn from each other and make it a bit interactive. Okay, so how to get the most from your smartphone camera and how to take great photos. Quick and easy to use tips. Now, The first tip that I have is get a strap. Okay, now, why should you get a strap? The reason that you should get a strap is this. You have got what in photography, what we talk about glass. You've got very expensive glass. And that it has happened to me, and please God, it won't happen again, that I've dropped my iPhone, and to get it repaired, the first thing, it's heartbreaking when it happens, but to get it repaired is very costly. And if you're serious about photography, okay, one of the things about photography is that photography makes you blind. What does that mean? It means that something gets your visual attention and you're all consumed with it. And you're here taking a photograph, and it could be that somebody behind you sees you and comes up and whips the photograph from you. So it just gives that added bit of security when you're doing it. But definitely, I think because it can drop. So you can buy cases which come purposely built for straps, with straps. Or if you've got a rubber case or a silicone case, what you could do, like I did with other case I had, get a lighter, get a pin, heat up the pin and pierce the side of your case, and then get somebody who's quite good at these things to thread through your lanyard, and you've got a case with a strap. First piece of advice. Second piece of advice, and this may seem very, very basic, how to hold the camera. Now get your camera out as we're doing this. And what I would say to you is, and I purposely did it here, very often when people are holding it, okay, they have it tilted. And I'm not sure, is it because the camera is heavy, or is it just something that happens for them? So what happens then, okay, because you don't have it straight, because you have it tilted, the perspective of your photograph is off. So, and how to hold it, first you have the strap, then you're trying to get your baby finger on the corner, your thumb at the other side, and on iPhone, they do it quite easily. They allow you then to use the volume button as your shutter release. Okay, on Android, if you're left-handed, it's fantastic because the volume button is on the right on Android to do it like that. But a good grip and trying to keep it straight, okay? Because you'll be surprised. So often I see people taking photographs, and I want to go, like when I do the workshops, it's great to do before you getting close to people without social distancing, but just to get the camera, the perspective, and get it straight. If you're holding it in landscape, okay, again, you know, let me see if I can add this. So you're trying to nestle it in between your index finger and baby finger to get a good grip of it. And then you can use your thumb, if it's on iPhone, for the volume button for the shutter release, or on Android, you can use your index up here for the shutter release as well. But again, trying to make sure the perspective is straight, that it's not tilted, because so often people will tilt it a little bit and become unaware of it. Turn on your grid. Now, that's one of the pieces of advice that I saw popping up in the chat. And the grid, okay, is that if you're on Android, you're looking for the little cog and the settings, you go in, there should be something down below that you can swipe to turn on your grid. On iPhone, you're going into settings and you're going to camera, and you're just going to slide over to make it green for turn on your grid. And what the grid is then, is we'll divide your screen into 9 squares. And going back to what one of the advice that somebody said about look at paintings. Paintings are a great way to understand how, you know, classic Renaissance artists, particularly, how they, you know, organize the elements in their paintings, how they composed, how they brought things together. And the rule of thirds is a really important, you know, rule to think about when you're composing in photography. And what it is really is, you see the photograph here, we've got the guy who is positioned at the intersection of the squares here, and it's off center. And what this gives us then is the perception of another rule called the rule of space and the rule of movement. So the eye is able to come into the screen and then is able to perceive the continued movement from it. So turn on your grid to allow you to do that. And then rules are there to be broken. Ignore the rule of thirds. You can put your subject bang in the center of the frame, whatever works for you. But again, to experiment. Most of the time that when you have it off center, it allows kind of perception of movement. Here with the tree, works well. bang in the center. Okay, now here's a really easy to use and easy to learn technique to get good quality exposures on your photographs. Now, have your camera with you at the moment, and we're going to do a little bit of experimenting. Wherever you are at the moment, on the screen, just tap to focus. And what that does then, you see probably a yellow box will appear. Show you a short video about this in a second. That's where you have focused, okay? Now, the next one, you're also tapping to expose. And what expose means is how bright or how dark your image is. And then if you slide down, so if you slide up, the image will get brighter. If you slide down, it will darken, okay? Now, here's a rule for you, that in photography, we talk about exposing for the highlights. The highlights are the bright parts of your image. So here in this photograph, the taximeter sign was the brightest part of the image. So I tapped on that, and then it balanced the rest of the photograph. Because your camera, 99% of the time, will make really good decisions for you. But sometimes it will make a bad decision because it's confused by the light sources. So here, it doesn't know whether to expose for the people and the market stalls behind, or to expose for the light on the taximeter. So you need to take control. So you tap on the brightest part of the image. And a very good way to experiment with that is that tonight, if you're watching television in a dark room, point your camera at the television, and then tap everywhere except for the TV screen. And notice how the light changes. And then tap on the TV, and boom, hey presto, you've exposed correctly. So if you watch this short video here, it'll help to explain it a little bit more. Okay. That if you can't hear the volume, but you should be able to just put a message in the chat for me.
What I'm going to demonstrate here is a very, very quick and easy way to get a good exposure for your photographs. Most of the time, the camera will make fantastic decisions for exposure of light. Sometimes it won't, as we can demonstrate here in the image that we're looking at now. So we see we have the lamp as the brightest part in the image, and it's really overexposed and giving not a nice look to the image. We can easily correct it. How do we do it? Now, you see the yellow box in the bottom left-hand corner. If we touch around the screen, what is happening is anywhere we touch, it's exposing for the light. Now, as we get closer to the brightest part, boom, once we touch that, the light corrects. This is called exposing for the highlights. Practice it with it as yourself. A very good way to practice with this is when you're watching television in a dark room, put the camera around the room, and you see that when it comes to the brightest light of the television, it can be very, very overexposed and give you this white blob. If you touch on the TV, the brightest part of the image, suddenly it'll get exposed correctly. Now, next to the yellow box, we see this little sundial. Slide down, it'll darken your image. Slide up, it'll brighten your image. And when you get the exposure that you like, you can just take your image. Now, iPhone does something really well also, is that it allows you to touch and hold, and this will result in an auto exposure, autofocus lock. And what this allows you to do is to lock your exposure value, lock your light. And this means that no matter what else comes into your image, lighting is not going to change. So you see here, we've got our image, and we can create these beautiful silhouettes with my hand behind the bright image. So auto exposure, autofocus lock, touch and hold, tapping around the screen, and you're looking to find your correct exposure, expose for the highlights, touching the brightest part of the image, and that's how you do it.
Okay, so again, so you're tap to focus, tap to expose, slide to brighten, up, slide to darken. On Android, it might be sometimes slide to the left to darken and slide to the right to brighten. Burst mode, as I said, so on iPhone, you keep your finger on the volume up button, this one here, and it'll take multiple photographs. You can also swipe to the left with the shutter on iPhone, and it'll take more. On Android, just keep your finger on the shutter. So you see here, these photographs from India. I set up my composition. I anticipated, I knew that the guy was going to be running into the water. And when he did, I had my finger on the shutter. And then later, I was able to go and to choose the photograph that I liked best. When I posted it on Instagram, people comments, brilliant timing. It's not brilliant timing at all. It's just using the burst mode and anticipating the movement of the character within it. Take lots of photos, okay? On my camera roll, okay, again into chat, we'll see, can anybody get close to the right number? How many 1,000 photographs do you think I have on my camera roll at the moment? I don't know, maybe I've no prize for anybody for correctly guessing, but we'll just see, can anybody, 10,000, 30,000, 15, more than 10, 64, 4,047. Okay, right, 40, 25. Okay, so Dolores O'Driscoll, you're the closest. At 25, at the moment, at 25,361. So the point is that it's free. Once you buy your device, you can take as many photographs as you want. And that it's a really good way to practice, okay? Changing your perspective, taking a photograph from this angle, taking a photograph from low angle to high to low, and trying with different perspectives really will improve you for it. So take lots and lots of photos. That's what I would say to you. And in photography, we talk about working the scene. And this is a scene in Cork, in Caroline Street, with beautiful new artwork here by Shane O'Driscoll. And when I was photographing it, I knew what I wanted to get. So I had my scene set up, and I was waiting for people to walk into the image and to get the photograph with the human element and making sure the composition was right and with it. So I stayed there for a period of time, taking the photographs, and then eventually I chose this one and this one from all of these photographs. Now, here, I took actually many more. I took maybe about 200 photographs when I was there. But eventually, the ones that I liked was this one here and this one here. So again, it's a really good opportunity. You're trying to maximize your opportunities with photography. So take multiple photographs, work the scene. And then the most difficult thing in photography for me is photography will make you blind. That's the first thing. You'll see something, you're magnetized to your image, and you may not be able to see what's going on in the rest of the photograph. And framing is the first thing. So what gets your attention, you frame. But what you're trying to work towards and to achieve is being able to reframe. And if you think of a writer, everybody can write, but the art of writing is in the rewriting, is in the edit that will come, the rewriting. So in this two photographs here, so like, first of all, I was attracted to the reflection of the car roof with the tree. Then I noticed, that it was how it was framing with the building, the School of Commerce behind. And you see here, then I was a little bit frustrated because I didn't want the glass here to be seen. You can see that here's another attempt that I did here, and it just needed to be a little bit more care. So what I did then is I reframed, and that bang, the tree is obscuring the visual distraction of what was in these ones. Okay, so that again, it's a really difficult thing to do because photography, again, repeating myself, you have fractions of seconds to work through. Something gets your visual attention, and you have to reframe to get the image, but you're moving from reactionary to intentional. And now, so we've talked about the things that you can do, that you should do. Now we've got things that no-nos, things you shouldn't do. All right, now, when I was asking you for, to put in and share your advice, some of you hit the nail on the head and, spoke about things that you shouldn't do. And to me, there really are just maybe 2 or 3 things that I would say are big no-nos, things that you should not do. Okay, so what do you think they are? The first one, what do you think it is? Looking at that photograph, what do you think that you shouldn't do? Put into the chat, what do you think? So this demonstrates that if I had used something, this photograph would not have worked. What do you think it would have been? Okay. Flash, yeah, Celine, you got it. Good. Okay, so if you remember what I said, you're going to use available light, okay? And flash is your enemy, okay? And why is flash your enemy? Flash is your enemy because 2 reasons. One, the range of the flash is only about 1.5 meters. So when you see flashes popping off all around the stadium, for a football match or a concert, all they're doing is that they're illuminating the head of the person in front of them. And the second thing, if I had used flash here, what would have happened would be that instead of getting all these lovely reflections from the neon sign at this side of the street onto the bonnet of the car here, what would have happened is that there would have been a white blob of the flash onto the bonnet of the car, and everything else would have been black. So use available light. Remember what he said, find the brightest point and tap on your screen and expose for that. Also with flash is going to give you this terrible red eyes. And when you're using it, it's going to make skin look really, really pasty and off color. So use the available light. Use lights from windows, use light, natural light that you can get. So like this is a photograph here with in Edinburgh at dusk, and the night mode will work really, really well. Just make sure you hold the camera steady. And the second one, no zoom. Now, so often when people come to me and they'll say, like, you know, why don't my photographs look as good as yours? One of the main questions that I ask them when I look at the photograph, I ask the question, did you zoom? Did you pinch and zoom? Yeah. Is that something I shouldn't do? Yes, definitely. No zoom. And the reason why, because when you're pinching and zooming, what you're doing is that you're deteriorating the visual quality of your image. And that each time you do it, the image is becoming pixelated and more noisy. And again, in photography, we've got the expression, zoom with your feet. Okay, if you're not close enough, get closer. Then filters. I would say to you to avoid using filters. Now, on some of the phones, that if you're using the filter, you can step back and you get back to the original image. But sometimes that if you shoot in black and white, you can see it here, you can't convert it to color. And I think it's good not to use filters because you're training your eye and you want to see how things look at the moment. Later, when you go to editing, you can apply any filter that you want, but initially, don't use filters. Okay, then when you come to editing, you've taken your photograph, you've taken care about composition, you've employed the different techniques in terms of getting a good exposure. With editing, you need to remember that editing can make a good image better. That's what it's about. We're trying to make a good image better, but what it can't do is make a bad image good. So if you look at the photograph here, it's really bad composition, okay? And no matter what I do in editing, saturated, apply filters, it's still not gonna look good. Last tip that I would have is my belief about education, my belief about art, my belief about life. Imitate. Now, people will say to you that you shouldn't copy, and that's nonsense. That copying is such an important part of learning, and all of us are constantly copying. It's impossible not to, because we consume so much information. So even in photography, that in terms of you did kind of a ratio with the number of photographs that I look at, with the number of photographs that I post, I'm always going to look at multiples of photographs in comparison to how many I post. So it's inevitable that I'm going to be at some level imitating them. But then the next, it's not step, but the next part of it is assimilation. So that all that we've consumed, we begin to internalize it. And then what you're hoping for is eventually to become innovative and that you have your own expression, your own photographic style with it. Now, I used to think that it was imitate, assimilate, innovate, like 3 incremental steps, but the reality is that 3 of them are, happening together all the time. And the most important one, have fun. If it's not fun, take up golf or bridge or, gardening, do something else. It's a hobby. It should be fun. It should be fun for you. So with editing, I'll very quickly, because I know that just time management, the app that I use for editing is one called Snapseed. And Snapseed, I'll send you with the links to them. Snapseed is from Google. It's a free app and it is powerful what you can do in terms of editing. Remember again, apps can make a good image better. Okay. Very quickly, this is just Nespresso pods inside in Brown Thomas in Cork, what they are. But what editing can't do is make a bad image good. And this image here, I think, is a good one to demonstrate for me. Now, remember that it's a personal choice. For me, that this photograph here is over edited. and that you don't want the editing to be the story of the photograph. You want the photograph to tell its own story, not the edit, not the processing. So for me, the clouds are too dramatic, the colors are artificial, they're oversaturated, and it's obvious it was edited. Less is more. Addition is dilution when it comes to editing. So you see here, we've got the colors, but they look natural. They're not overly saturated. But here, you can see the colors are just, they're unnatural, they're too vibrant. And again, that the edit is telling the story of the photographs, not the actual photograph itself. So that was a very quick walkthrough of why the iPhone or the Android phone, let's say smartphone, is the greatest camera ever. Getting us thinking about what actually is photography. So photography is more about the images, not about the image capturing device. Okay. And then we also looked about how to get the most from your smartphone, the different techniques that you have, the different things that are at your disposal, and then thinking about editing. And you can download, as I said, from the App Store or from the Google Play Store, Snapseed. And it's a fantastic, very, very simple to use editing suite that you have with it. That if you want to follow me on Instagram, here you can actually use your camera. If you put your camera up to the QR code here, it'll bring you to my Instagram feed. And what I'll do now is that we'll have some, I know that you've been typing into the question and answers box. If you have questions for me, and I'll try to answer some of your questions. Yeah.
Hi, Brendan. Thanks so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you.
If you just stop sharing your screen there.
Yeah, we'll do. Okay.
Yeah, so we have loads of questions. I think it was really practical and just great to see all the things you can do. I've already added grid lines, so my photos will be better already. I know I personally am a big fan of portrait mode. I always feel like it takes a really nice personal shot and adds a bit of depth to a picture. Have you any other tips for taking portraits? Because I know a lot of the people here work for charities, community groups, and that's kind of the photos that they'll be taking.
Okay, so what I would say about portraits, if you think of the word portrait, okay, so portrait is a noun, the verb is to portray. So when somebody is portraying, it's that you're trying to get them to reveal something of their character, so that there's some connection then with the viewer. And that if you think about it and you ask yourself the question, do you like having your own photograph taken? Most people will say, no, I hate it.
Yeah.
Right? And that me as well. And like they think why is it that people hate their photograph being taken? Because immediately when you put a camera up in front of somebody, you're creating a barrier between you and them. So you're thinking about how can you overcome those barriers. And the easiest thing to do about it is that to remember again the tip that I gave you, is that you want to take multiple photographs. And with portraits, that when you put the camera up against somebody, they become very, very self-conscious, and that if they don't look natural. So what you want to achieve is that you want to break that barrier. And the way to do it is by just talking to the person. So when you have the camera up in front of them, okay, like that, and you set up your composition, you set up your exposure with it, and just keep on talking to the person. What I find when, with the, like I did as I said, the big campaign with the project with Bord Gash and the All Ireland Championship 2018. And I was kind of jumping in front of people, telling them about the project and asking, could I take their photograph? And I had a very short little opportunity to make a connection with them. So what I find is that if I would tell them about myself, they become a little bit more relaxed. And that to take multiple photographs. Now, when I say that you're taking portraits, you might think it's crazy, but, take 30, 40, 50, because it really is just a fraction of a second that you're dealing with. So like that, it may be in a 2 or 3 minute just engagement with somebody taking their portraits, that you could take 30 or 40 photographs. You're multiplying your opportunities to get a good photograph. That's the first thing that I would say, is you're trying to achieve to put the person at their ease, because then they'll forget cameras in front of them, and that they'll reveal, that there'll be little micro flash of a smile, or that there'll be kind of a warmth in their eyes or something like that. Okay. The second thing then is that with portraits, what you're trying to achieve, okay, is that there's nothing visually distracting in the portrait that you're taking. Okay, so if you look at where I am here on screen, that what you're trying to do is that you're trying to think that there's like a halo around the person's form of their head, and that there's nothing distracting. So think of a classic one, sometimes somebody behind their head will put the two fingers up. So you're trying to think, all right, in the background, is there anything which is distracting? So for me here, we've got the red of the photograph behind, with the white of the door, we've got the headrest of the chair. It's a bit distracting. So then you're thinking, do I, as the photographer, need to move, or do I need to ask the person I'm taking the photograph to move? So if I come over here, it's less distracting. So you can see that I'm getting more of a uniform background, that I'm not between the two. And a really easy technique to achieve that is that, like, tonight, or if you're at work or you're at home with family or on dinner, just look at the person who's opposite you and think, if I was to take their portrait now, would I need to move, or would they need to move, so that there's a clean background? As I said, photography makes you blind and you're attracted to your subject in front of you, but very often you won't notice the things that are causing visual distractions. So they would do two things: engage with the person, talk about yourself, and take multiple photographs. Keep on shooting, because what you're looking for is this kind of micro flash of a smile, or that there's warmth, and to do it like that. The final thing I'll say about portraits is just with the light. If the light is coming into the person here, they're going to squint. Okay, if the light is behind them, you're going to get a silhouette. So you're probably trying to get the light coming from the side onto the face. And just, again, experiment with it. Move the person around, or you move around, and you'll see, oh, the light is better from this perspective, this angle.
Yeah, that's really great. I hadn't thought too much about the lights of this. That's really useful.
Yeah.
And another of probably the most common instances that a lot of our attendees today will be using photography is at events. Have you any tips for that? I always think, obviously, the photos look better outside, but of course, a lot of events are indoors, or in community halls, or hotel rooms, or banquet rooms, or things like that. So have you any tips for taking photos indoors and of taking photos at events?
Okay, so again, I think that what you're trying to do is that you're probably trying to tell the story of what the event is. And I think that maybe to have a combination of approaches in terms of maybe that you have candid photographs, so that you have the people who are interacting, without they knowing that you're taking the photographs, then they're going to look much more natural. So you're trying to think about what is the story of the event that you want to communicate. So like that, is it that everybody is engaging and talking to each other, or that people enjoying a presentation? So for example, that if there was a group of people who are listening to a presentation, maybe that you could use the perspective of those in the audience. So you might take a photograph behind them, looking at the person who's giving the presentation. If it's the other story that you want to give of the person who's doing the presentation, or the person who's performing, maybe that you're taking it from their perspective. So changing the perspective with that can work. Taking then just the candid photographs of the reactions of the audience, the engagements that they have among each other, can work quite well in the candid ones. And then if it is that you want to take portrait, you're thinking very much again that, is it that, do you want branding in the photograph? If it is, how are you going to set up the framing? Because you've got your subject, and maybe that you've got your they're standing behind branding, and you're trying to frame initially for the branding, and then you're thinking where you want to position the people. And it can be challenging in terms of that, like a photographer needs to be assertive, and that if it is that you have that you want to get branding into a photograph and you want the people in the right place, you need to tell them, and you need to know, can you move a little to the right? No, you need to come out a little, and sometimes even physically to move them to get the photograph that you want. And that's tough, that is challenging to do. Then you're also thinking about the lighting conditions, and similar to what I said about if the light is on the face, it's going to be squinting. If it's behind, it's going to create a silhouette. So again, just experiment with it indoors. You're thinking of the story that you want to tell. You're thinking, are there visual elements? So it could be like product placements, where you're going to put them, and to be assertive with them. Outdoors, similar, the mix between candid and kind of posed for photographs like that. Taking multiple photographs, increase your opportunities, and trying to be to gain as much control of the environment and the subject as you can. but it's challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah,
But
I thought
anything,
that tip about being assertive, because I could definitely do more of it. But also, I think it's that thing, it saves the disappointment afterwards when you look at them and think, I could have done that better.
Yeah. And people will respond well to that. They know that you're trying to get the best photograph, and to be descriptive and expressive in that what you're doing. And I think a smile and please and thank you goes a long way with it as well.
Yeah. Someone has asked, apart from burst, any tips on taking moving objects, for example, sports events?
Okay. Well, I think burst mode is definitely the one that I would use for it, because that you're catching a fast moving scene. That on the native camera apps that on most of them, but definitely an iPhone, you can't take manual control over the camera. But you can download non-native camera apps, and in some of them, it allows you to take manual control over it, and it allows you to be able to take control of the shutter speed. And the shutter speed, as I said, is that how long the hole is opens and closes, leaving the light in. So that if it was that you were taking photographs of like let's say a hurling match or something like that, you may want to have the shutter speed at 1,000 or 2,000th of a second. And with the native camera app, it won't allow you to do that. But if you download an app like Pro Camera or First Light, it'll allow you to increase the shutter speed, and it'll allow you to freeze the movement much more with more clarity, and to get a sharp image like that. So I'll send you some links on to you, Claire, and you can share them with them. And one of the ones would be to download an app like, for example, the one that comes to mind is First Light. And that's, I think, you may have to pay for it. I'm not sure if it's free, but it's like, when you think about it, like the apps that are available for mobile photography are very, very cheap when you compare them to the apps, the kind of accessories for DSLR photography. So like, if you wanted to change a lens in DSLR photography, you're talking maybe hundreds, but that to buy an app can be something like maybe €5 or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good investment. Speaking of investments, a couple of people have asked about add-ons. So someone asked about an additional tool like a light box and as an additional light source, and someone asked about add-on lenses for Android phones, or should they be avoided?
Okay, so I think the first thing is just, if you look at the back of the camera, and if you see that you've got like 3 circles or 2 circles, it means that you've got 2 or 3 lenses. And then I wouldn't think that you need to have the clip-on lenses that are available. If it is that you just have one lens, one circle at the back, then there are a range of lenses, accessories that you can add on to the camera. And the ones that I recommend, probably they can be a little bit pricey. They come from a company called Moment, and you can just Google that, and they would have more for iPhones than they would have for Android phones. And again, it's a thing that just manufacturers need to create one for iPhone, whereas they may need to create multiple ones for the different Android phones that are there. Other accessories, I think like the basic one that I said is about just the strap. I'm very minimalist in my kind of workflow. I don't use the add-on lenses, and I have maybe handheld flashes and things like that, but I tend not to use them that much.
And we've also been asked by quite a few people about storage, and what are your tips? I know you're going to send on a few links for that as well. Okay,
so with storage, I'm quite paranoid of losing photographs. I have 256 gig on the phone, and I'm running out of space. And with it, I have iCloud, and I'm also running out of space. But I find the one that works best for me, that I'd recommend to people, is that if it is that you're taking kind of quite a lot of photographs, and you want the ability to be able to organize them and to be able to access them and retrieve them, with speed, I would recommend Flickr. And Flickr is online, and I think for $50 or might be €50 a year, you've unlimited storage, and you've got fantastic controls over who can see the photographs. So you can have all your photographs public, or you can have all your photographs private. You can categorize them into albums, and you can categorize those albums into collections, and that also that you can put hashtags on all the photographs. So it could be that, for example, that took a photograph, let's say in Dublin on September 17th, And I remember somebody in a red coat. You could just put in red coat and it would bring that back, that photograph, or you could put in September 17th and it would bring it back. So I think for me, I use Flickr. I've everything uploaded on there. They're all categorized in terms of, you know, the time, where I was, the type of photographs, etc. Flickr.com. It'll be in the links that I send to you.
Great. And a few people have asked different questions about photographing at night. So someone said, should we always use night mode at night if we aren't to use a flash?
Okay, so again, at night to use the flash, like it's going to give very, very artificial light for you. Now, sometimes it can work quite well. I think try to you know, again, in learning about how light changes and how you can, you know, shoot best with different light types. I think just to, you know, try to use the available light with and become more observant of how light changes and etc. Night mode, I think, is fantastic. But the thing that you need for night mode is just make sure that you're holding it steady. Because there's a little bit of movement, you're going to get camera shake and you're going to have maybe a blurred out like that. But I think that the night mode is really, it's powerful, and it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better. Okay.
And yeah, someone else asked about blurry night shots, so it's probably the same thing.
Yeah, that again, so like I think maybe there might be a number of reasons why you're getting blurry night shots. I think that just make sure that you're tapping and controlling the exposure, so that when you have a night scene, just, you know, you're holding it, and that find the brightest light, tap there, and then either slide to darken or slide to brighten, so you can see the exposure changing in front of you. And I think that will give a better balance to the lighting conditions, and there'll be less. And if you lock the focus then as well, and just make sure that you hold it steady, you know, position yourself, get, you know, so like that if you wedge yourself up against a wall or something like that, it'll just give you an extra bit of stability, so that you're not moving, you know.
Yeah. And someone else asked about when you're exposing for highlights, does that work for photographing the moon? Because we've always seen those really tiny moon shots, and it looks amazing to you. Yeah,
like I know that the Google Pixel, and also some of I think the iPhone 13 as well, Google Pixel particularly, that it will allow really, really good photographs of the night sky and the moon, but you have to have it on a tripod. Because if it's handheld, it's going to shake and that. But I've seen some spectacular photographs of you know, kind of the Milky Way and things like that taken on smartphones. But it's tripod, and then you're leaving the lens open, the shutter open. Sorry, leaving the shutter open for, I think on the latest ones you can have it up to a minute. So that really will allow the light to come in for it like that. I haven't managed a good photograph like that though.
Someone asked, you have a lot of street photography in your collection.
Yep.
What about permission from your subjects to photograph them?
Okay, so I think first of all, the way I'll answer that question is that I'll talk about my own approach. And my own approach is that when I'm taking photographs, I put myself in the position, think, if I was in the position of the person I'm taking a photograph, would I be comfortable with? And that my rule of thumb for myself is that anybody who's in distress, anybody that's vulnerable, I don't take photographs of them. Of children, I don't take photographs either, because I have 2 kids myself, and I think that, you know, I wouldn't be really comfortable with people taking them photographs of them. In terms of the legal situation, that your right to privacy does not exist in public places. And public places are anywhere where people gather. So it can be restaurants, bars, cafes, on the street. And that in terms of, like, I'm probably shooting street photography maybe about 12, 13 years. I can count on the one hand the number of times that I had, you know, people being angry, or, you know, kind of telling me that I had no right to take their photograph. And that you need to understand that, again, it goes back to the question when you think about, you know, do you like having your own photograph taken? Most people say no, they don't. And that sometimes when people see that you're taking the photograph, their first reaction is never anger. Anger is always a secondary emotion. Their first reaction is always curiosity. And they're thinking, you know, what I take my photograph for, you know, looking around and things like that. And, you know, sometimes with candid photographs, I don't engage with people. I take the photograph and move on. Other times I'll go and I'll talk to the person, I'll show them the photograph, and I'll, you know, offer to email the photograph to them. And as I said, that in 13 years or so, shooting street photographs all over the world. I've had maybe 2 or 3 situations where people got upset, and usually it's in saying that, it was more that I've taken photographs of shop fronts. That twice that it happened, I've taken a photograph of shop front and somebody was unhappy with that. But what I would say is, if you take a photograph of a street scene and somebody asks you, that comes to me and says, you shouldn't be, you've no right to take my photograph, I don't start telling them no illegally. I delete it and say, yeah, do you want me to delete it? Yeah, okay, no problem.
Much easier than getting into any kind of conflict.
Yeah. And just on that, like, I've had people who, on my Instagram that I've, post photographs, and I've had people who found their own photograph and had contacted me that they wanted a copy of it. And there's been some fantastic stories like that of, people, that I had the photograph up and a member of the family would see it and say, oh, that's my uncle, or, that's my, my next door neighbor, and things like that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Someone has asked, please give tips on depth of field and blurring background.
Okay. So what depth of field is that if you look at me on the screen at the moment, so that I'm the main subject, and what you want to create is this sense of kind of distance between me and the wall behind me, so that you want me to look in focus and sharp, and then there's a reduction of what is in focus and sharp as it moves back, so that you're creating this field of depth that you would have with it. Now, an easy way to practice with that is that, just again back to the focus. So when you have the camera, so just tap on what you want to focus, and you'll notice, even with the most basic of smartphones, that what you've chosen to focus on in the foreground creates a little bit of depth of field with the background, that it just becomes a little bit defocused. But with the portrait mode on, since the iPhone 7 Plus up, that the portrait mode is using computational photography. And what it's doing, well, I won't bore you with the techniques very quickly, but what it's doing is that it's sending a laser out to where I am, comes back to the camera, and then the camera has calculated the distance between me and the subject. Then it sends another laser back from where I am to the next point, and it's making the calculation, okay, everything to here is going to be sharp and everything behind is going to be out of focus. So the portrait mode does that really, really well in terms of creating, what they call bokeh. And it's done with the computational photography, because like on big DSLR cameras, they do it really powerfully, that you'll have sharp foreground and then blurred out background. But that, again, just by the tapping, it'll automatically create this sense of depth between the main subject in the foreground and the background. And it's just an experiment with it. Using the portrait mode will achieve that as well.
Great. Someone has asked, which way should you hold your phone, portrait or horizontal, or do you always shoot portrait then edit the dimensions in Snapseed?
Okay, so two things which are important there is that, and I'll deal with the more important one first. Cropping is your enemy. Okay, so that when it comes to editing, I virtually never crop, and the reason being is that if I have the mentality that later I can crop something out when I'm taking the photograph, it will result in me being lazy. So I always try to get it done in camera, so that when I'm in a situation, I'm trying to make sure that the composition is the one that I'm going to finish with. It's not, so like if you look again at me on the screen here, like that, when I'm taking the photo, the setup this morning, I had it so like that the room was set up properly behind me. But that if I took the photograph and I wanted to crop out from the door, then the balance, the dimensions are going to be lost later on. So I want to set up everything as in shot for it. That would be the first thing, is that don't rely on saying, oh, later on I'll crop it out. Get it done in camera, because again, you can't return to a scene. You can't, it's unique lighting conditions, unique moment. Get it done in camera. Don't rely on cropping. And the first part of the question then was, just remind me what the first part of the question was.
About edit. yeah, do you always shoot portrait and then edit the
Oh,
dimensions?
yeah.
And then
Okay.
which one is better to shoot in? But I suppose it just depends on what.
So to me, it depends on what the scene is. Some, like, so if it's a portrait, you're going to have it in portrait mode. Sometimes you want to get more of the scene, you'll be using it in, you know, the landscape mode. It depends on what the scene is and for it. But the only thing that I'd say is that when you use it in landscape mode, you're using the full resolution of the camera. Portrait mode uses less like that. But it's whatever the scene requires at the time, portrait or landscape.
And similarly, we were asked the type of photos I've least success with on my phone are landscape, say a mountain. I notice color distortion.
Okay. So what I would say with that, it depends on what, and maybe the person could put into the chat what device they were shooting on. That in terms of if it's an older camera phone, sometimes they may not have what is called high dynamic HDR, high dynamic range. And what high dynamic range is, if you think about it, so like with a landscape photograph, that, you know, maybe that you've got green grass, you've got, you know, kind of foliage which is kind of brown and green of the mountain, then you've got the blue of the sky. When you put the camera up to it, the camera again is going to make a decision about exposure. And if you're pointing it at the mountain, it's probably thinking, okay, that the mountain is what you want the main light source is, and you want the colors represented best there. And what can happen then is that the grass in front of you, instead of being green, becomes black, and the sky can be a little bit dark. On the latest iterations of phones, they have the high dynamic range, and what it is that, you know, it's making composites of photographs. So it's exposing for the green of the grass, it's exposing for the kind of brown and green of the mountains and the blue of the sky. So it'll balance it better with the high dynamic range in it. But that it depends on the lighting conditions as well. It's a hard one maybe to answer like that, but just maybe on your phone, if it's an older edition, there is an option to put on HDR, and that would make a composite. It'll take 3 photographs and knit them together for you to have the better lighting conditions like that.
And a similar troubleshooting one, someone said, is there anything you can do to get the dot off an iPhone photo? I'm not familiar, okay. Maybe you are. It seems to happen with sunlight, and the only way I can eliminate it is by making it and be in line with the sun. Okay, so yeah, what I'll do is I'll share my screen, okay, and I'll show you how to do that in Snapseed. So, headphones, right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring this one in. Okay, so I'll demonstrate it here. So this is a photograph that I took yesterday, and you see here there's a little. It's a reflection of the River Lee, and now it isn't the green dot. And what the green dot is, okay, is that if you look here, you see this. So what it is that the light hits this, and it reflects it back out, and the green dot. And you get green dot on so many photographs, okay. But Snapseed is a fantastic tool, which I'll demonstrate here. So let me just copy. Okay, and bring it into Snapseed. So I'm going to bring this photograph into Snapseed. Okay, now Snapseed is really, really intuitive. Just very quickly, when you come in, that up at the top, it's got tutorials built into it that you can follow. You know, it gives you a lot of things that you can do. So it's really, really easy to use. And I'll also send the document and using it later on. But let's say here that I want to get rid of this, you know, I think it's a leaf that was in the water, okay? So what Snapseed allows me to do is I come to tools, okay, down at the bottom, and on tools, you have 28 different tools, and it is just absolutely super powerful what you can do with your photographs. What I'm going to look for is the one which is called healing. So you see it in the third row of the left here, healing. And what healing will allow me to do is it'll allow me to select the part of the image that I want to get rid of. So imagine that this part here was a green dot. All I need to do, okay, is I need to just touch, and it's gone. Okay, so again, now why this works really, really well, I'll demonstrate, okay, is because that the information which is around it here is uniform, so it's all blue, okay?
And you see what it does is taking the information from one part of the image and it's pasting it onto the other. So because we had just a little dot, what I do then just with my finger, and it's gone. Okay. To demonstrate that if I wanted, let's say it was something over here, and here we've got a patterned background. Let's say I wanted to get rid of the two windows in the center. Works a little, but if I continue with it, it's going to move the images, the information from the side around. But what's great about it, Snapseed, is down here, I can step back. Okay. And it's still there, just tap, and I got rid of it. Okay. So the green dot, which you'll find frequently, but it'll allow you just the healing tool to come in and to tap, and it'll get rid of it. For you.
And we've had a few people ask, do you use that app on your phone or your laptop? But it looks like you use it on your phone.
I've got bad eyesight, and I pay also for subscription to Adobe Lightroom for my desktop, which is here to my right. But I'll bring all my images in, no matter what I'm shooting on, a Fuji or Nikon or iPhone. I'll bring them in and I'll work on the small little screen like this, which is, it's just what I'm used to. It's just what I used to. I much prefer the Snapseed. It's free and it's incredibly powerful. What you can do with it. What you can do with it.
And one last question while you have your phone open is, could you demonstrate taking bursts again? A few people were asking.
Okay. So right. So what I'll do, okay, I'll just bring up the camera. So when I come into camera, okay, now we're going to get a little bit of meta here. So I'll turn on the volume. Now on iPhone, you've got two options, okay, that I can press the top volume button and it'll take multiple photographs, okay, or I can drag to the right, okay, see it there, the shutter, and it'll take multiple photographs. So I'll demonstrate with the, gets a bit crazy here, with the top one, and you should be able to hear it. And you see at the bottom, you have the numbers, yeah? So that took, I think it was 44 photographs. Now, what I do then to review is I come to the left and you see that you have the photos that I took. And up here, top right, tells me burst, 42 photographs. Bottom center, I've got select. And what I do then is that it allows me to review the photographs. And the one that I like, let's say I like this one for argument's sake. Bottom right, I hit the white circle. And it's saying one photo selected. I come up and I do done, and it's asking me keep everything, keep the 42 photographs, or just keep the one that I want, and I just keep one photograph, and that would be, and that's burst mode. So again,
saves your memory.
Yeah. So top the volume button, and you see when you see the numbers clocking up, that's what the photograph is taking, or swipe to the left, and the same thing.
Great.
Brilliant.
Well, that's fantastic, Brendan. Thank you so much. Really
thank you as well.
That.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody. Yeah.
So useful. And I know a few people said they were welling up with your daughters. Where do yesterday's go? Which I absolutely love. Okay, I think we'll all get onto that one. So yeah, thank you. Thanks a million. And I'll just let everyone know about our next few sessions. So next week, we have the Art of Contemporary Storytelling panel. So that will be with journalists Louise Brayton and Leodin Hines and Leon Diop from Black and Irish. So they'll be having a really great chat about how to tell stories in 2021. Then we have engagement strategy for Facebook and Instagram. So that's one for any social media managers. That's with Jean O'Brien from the Digital Charity Lab. And then we have Keith Bradshaw, who is a Squarespace trainer from Urban Brand Creative, and he's going to be teaching us all how to build our own website, regardless of our skills. So you can sign up for any of them at weact.ie/training, and you'll be able to find today's session there, but I'll also email it out to you, and you can watch back any of the previous sessions as well. So thanks again, Brendan, and thanks for Hannah.
Thanks to everybody.
The lovely introduction, and we'll see you all hopefully next week. Thank you.